Happy Sunday and welcome into another Arkansas football recruiting report. As always, that's Otis Kirk. I am Jacob Morris. And Otis, we have a whole lot to cover today. We've got high school
Yeah.
recruiting, we have got transfer portal as well. Unfortunate, by the way, and I know we'll talk about it a little bit later. Unfortunate, the spring game got canceled yesterday, got washed out by rain. I know a lot of fans were looking forward to that. Unfortunate with the
Yeah,
timing,
sucks.
unfortunate with all the weather, but the positive, at least some recruiting news, some roster news for Razorback fans coming up. We're going to begin high school, and then we'll cover just the slew of portal commits the Hogs had yesterday. So we
They had a
begin
good
with,
day.
yeah, heck of a day. We begin with Carnell Jackson Jr. in Auburn, Alabama, defensive lineman. The Hogs pick up 6'3", 342. Earlier this week, a high school commit for Deke Adams, a big-time interior defensive lineman guy, a guy that Arkansas prioritized and ultimately ends up getting a verbal commit from.
Yeah, some people said, "Well, Auburn didn't offer him," so I don't know, what about look, defensive tackles don't grow on trees, man. I mean, everybody looks at a kid and sees different things, and Arkansas Deke liked this kid. You gotta remember Auburn didn't offer TJ Metcalf
Mhm.
out of high school. So, I mean, it's kinda like, I guess beauty lies in the, eyes of the I mean, you Arkansas liked this kid, and defensive tackles are hard to find. Kids who have the academics, the athletic ability, just everything that you need to play defensive tackle in the SEC. Those kids don't grow on trees. And Arkansas found Carnell and really liked him. And he has the size. You brought that up. He
Mm.
had 36 tackles, 3 for loss, 12 quarterback hurries. So he's obviously knows how to get to the quarterback. And he's just a big body that, and you can't get too many of those.
Mhm.
Everybody's looking for defensive tackles, and Deke is a very good evaluator. And so if he's satisfied with that kid, I don't know why he wouldn't be, because like I said, the biggest thing is there are not very many of those around, and when you find one you like, you jump on him. And Cardell really liked Arkansas. I mean, he came up here for a visit. He's coming back for the red white game. Boy, he was at that practice last Saturday. That would have been
Mhm.
beautiful weather for spring
Yeah,
game.
perfect.
I mean, the Saturday he was here, it was beautiful. And too bad that they didn't have the game that day. But anyway, they did get a commitment from him, and he went public later in the week. He committed it on the visit, went public later in the week. But yeah, like I said, he gives them 12 commitments from high school.
Mhm.
You got Colton Yarborough, you got Ari Slocum, kid we had on. Well, we had both those kids
Mhm.
on here, and so they're getting pretty good start on the defensive line. And Deke will always be looking in the portal for more kids and other high school kids. They've still got Danny Beal
Mhm.
and other players, and even in the state of Arkansas, that they're going to bring in for visits on the defensive line. So you try to just stack those kids up because you can never get too many of them. And when Deeks finds one he likes, he offers him, and he closes pretty well on those kids,
Yeah.
and they all praise him. He's very what do I say, very in touch with the recruits. We've had them on here, and they talk about Colton maybe more than any of them. Colton, when he started calling, and Deke and Sam would either answer their calls,
Mhm.
or return them every time. And a lot of coaches, I guess, don't do that according to these recruits, but they do. And you just little things me add up to big things. In recruiting, you don't think as much. Well, he was busy, didn't take a phone call. He'll probably get back with. No, they get back, and like I said, little things like that pluses add up to big things when you land a kid. And Carnell's just the latest high school kid, and Deke's getting a pretty good start on that. So we'll see how this all ends up in recruiting. But there are some more in-state kids they're looking at. One from Little Rock Central that we had on the show, Danny Beal from
Mhm.
Cross County, home of Wayne Martin. So just keep trying to add those and see who you can get. You won't get them all, but you get your share of them. And I'll tell you, Colton Yarborough is a big time player, and
Mhm.
that's an edge. And then you get these guys on the inside, and the ones on the inside are hardest to find. They just, like I said, man, they just don't grow on trees. I mean, Jacob, they're hard to find, and that's why Deke jumped on this kid, and he's not worried about who else. Hey, Memphis offered this kid. They had a very good team last year, and Arkansas play them this year.
Mhm.
Liberty offered him, UAB, who You think, well, UAB, but then you go get Cam Shanks from there. Georgia gets a safety from there. Ole Miss got an offensive lineman from
Mhm.
UAB. So I mean, Adam, South Florida, Appalachian State. So he had good offers. He didn't have Auburn, but that's to me is not a concern. When Deke wants a kid, he knows what he wants. He's not concerned with if Auburn offered him or didn't offer. And so I don't feel like that's a big deal at all. I know some fans have said that to me, but that's not a concern to me.
Yeah, a couple things there. You talked about Deke's recruiting, and we've hit it over and over and over again. But it's really the entire defensive staff. You mentioned how
Right.
multiple recruits have talked about how accessible they are, but it's also. I mean, we see a new headline. It seems like every single day we are in the just smack dab the Wild West nature of
Yeah.
recruiting and the portal and all of that. And so the other thing too that we've just heard time and time again is just simply authenticity. Whether it be Deke, whether it be T. Will, whether it be any of these defensive coaches, just they shoot these guys straight, and it seems like recruits
Mhm.
really value that, and it's understandable. And you
Yeah.
also you talked about the importance of just getting interior defensive linemen, and it's
Right.
just different than perhaps the way that you would approach other position groups because
Yeah.
it's not that wide receivers or running backs are a dime a dozen in the portal, right? But they are more prevalent in the portal in a way that guys on the defensive line and really specifically the interior of the defensive line just
That's
aren't.
it
So
right
you
there.
approach high school recruiting in a way that you kind of got to get these guys into your system, develop them over a year, and then the value is having guys, having bodies that you are able to turn to that you've developed because it is just if you look around at teams that need defensive line help and specifically the interior of the defensive line, they're struggling to find guys in the portal because
Yeah.
they're just not there in large numbers. So that's
No.
an example of what you're talking about. You just have to get guys like this on campus, and then you'll see what you have, especially from a development
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. And you want to make that decision early. Like
Yeah.
Deke offered Colton Yarborough in the eighth grade, man. I mean, I keep going back to Colton, but I mean, he offered him in the eighth grade. He could wait around to see if OU was going to offer,
Yeah.
see if Oklahoma State or see if Auburn was going to offer. No, I mean, he saw Colton, projected what he would be like 3, 4 years down the road, and
Mhm.
offered him, and obviously it paid off. Number one
Big
player
time.
in Oklahoma, 4-star recruit, and just a big time player. So I mean, that's that's how you make. You can't wait around.
Mhm.
Well, Auburn didn't offer this kid. Big deal, Deke's not concerned with that, and I know some fans are, like I said earlier, but that's not to me. Is not a concern when Deke knows what he wants. And not everybody wants the same thing, Not
Mhm.
everybody wants the same thing. Some people want, but Deke feels like he can take this kid and adjust what he maybe doesn't do as well now and do it better later. And that's why you coach them up and you get them at that early age and you get them in your program, and then you have time to build them up to be the player that you project them to be.
Mhm.
And projections a lot of things. Potential in recruiting, it's just like the NFL draft this week, Jacob. You'll hear a lot of kids' name. You'll say, why did he get drafted? Well, it's potential, man. I mean, the NFL sees potential in players that maybe didn't do as well in college as another player did, but they see the potential. Hey, all coaches think they can get that magic. they can work that magic and get that out of the kid that the other coach couldn't. That's the way they operate, and it's not a bad philosophy. And so we'll see how it all works out. But a lot of recruiting is potential, just like the draft and everything else is.
Yep, yep. It's all about spotting talent and finding some way to develop it. But hey, let's go from high school to the transfer portal because man, Arkansas had itself a day yesterday. The spring
Yeah,
portal window opening Wednesday, going through next Friday as well. Coach Pittman was clear. He said we're going to look for some defensive help, and the Hogs
yeah,
got some defensive help yesterday. We'll start with Julian Neal, a DB coming over from Stanford. Really, in a way, coming over from Fresno State. He spent the
right.
spring with Stanford. Headed to the Cardinal from Fresno State in the winter window. And, he comes over and he was a valuable commodity. The number one DB per ESPN, the number
Yeah,
5 available guy per 24/7. This was
yeah.
a priority target. This was a guy a lot of people wanted in their secondary. Arkansas ultimately comes away and signs Neal a big time get for the Hogs in the secondary.
Yeah, Coach Cal came over and talked to him, before he left, and that helped seal the deal. And I will say this: when I talked to the kids, Neil was the one kid that was not going to sign with Arkansas. The other three were. He was going to wait and take some other visits
Mm,
because he got in the portal, and Arkansas jumped on him first and jumped on him real early and got that visit lined up. But there was a lot of schools coming
Yeah.
in, and so Julian thought, "Well, I'm going to take my time on this." Well, between talking to me and talking to Cal and Sam and closing the deal, he ended up signing with Arkansas. So it was a pleasant surprise. He's 6'2", 200, to play in
Mhm.
corner, safety, anywhere he wants to play back there. And like you said, he was the number one defensive back with some number 5 period player, regardless of position. Yeah, and another player, Cal helped, and Pittman and
Mhm.
Woodson and those guys, but also, Raylan Sharp
Yeah.
helped with him because they were
Yeah.
teammates at Fresno. And he said, "That's my man. That's my dog." And he said, Arkansas identified that, and that was their. They wanted to find a portal guy that could make a big impact, and they found one with him. And he had 35 tackles, 5 for loss, 6 pass breakups, a couple of interceptions, and a sack at Fresno last year. And he goes to Stanford thinking, "Well, this is where I'm going to spend
Mhm.
my last year." Troy Taylor gets fired,
Yeah.
bang, they're right back in the mix with Arkansas. And so this is where getting on a kid early, not waiting around to see who else is going to offer him. Arkansas jumped on Neal early, got that visit before anybody else did, and lined it up.
Mhm.
And he came in here, and like I said, he had no intention of signing with Arkansas when he arrived at the campus. But before he left here, he signed with them, and why it's so important. We say this every week to get these kids on campus, because anything can happen, and you get them on campus, and you can turn some heads. Because heck, Stanford's got good facilities and stuff, but Arkansas had great facilities. He was impressed by them, and at the end of the day, he just figured Arkansas had everything that he was looking for. So why visit? Why wait? They had what he wanted. They offered, and he told me the chance to play. He knew Arkansas had a need for his position, his talent, and he said that was very important because he didn't have a lot of time to mess around, and he's going to have he knows he's got to earn it, but he has an opportunity to play here and start, and that's what he was looking for. And at the end of the day, before he wrapped up his visit, he said Arkansas's got everything I want and
Mhm.
need, and so he signed with them, and that was the starting of a great day. And people ask me, well, they got the 4 kids that they brought in that play positions in need, but are they SEC caliber players? Well, here's the deal. Arkansas thinks they are. They wouldn't brought them in because these are not fallback recruits, Jacob. These are kids that Arkansas identified players at each position that they wanted, and they brought these in first because these
Mhm.
were the priorities at those positions. These are not fallback recruits. So Arkansas thinks they can play SEC or they wouldn't sign them. And so, but the biggest thing is, remember, these are priority recruits that they brought in this weekend. Now, they'll, if they feel like they need another defensive back, they'll look down the road and see one. But right now, they signed 2 yesterday, and Neal was the obvious prize of the visitors, and they're proud to get him, and he's going to do well this year. He makes a big difference in that secondary. Woodson, Perry, and those guys, uh, T. Will, all of them did a good job on him, and we'll see. But he's got a chance to really make a name for himself at
Mhm.
Arkansas, and with his size, I mean, he looks like a linebacker. I'm not going to lie to you, Jacob. This kid looks like a linebacker. He's 6'2", 200, but he just looks big. He kind of reminded me of Kanai Walker when he came
Mhm.
in on his visit. I looked at Kanai and I'm thinking, wow. And, this kid's the same way, built the same way, about 6'2", just like him. True cornerback, and he's powerful enough too that he's not going to be pushed around on the on the bump, on the press coverage and stuff. He can get up in their face, and these smaller receivers have a hard time going against him. So I like him, and Arkansas obviously liked him. A lot of people did, but getting on him early was the difference there, and they sealed the deal before he left campus. Because once they leave, you never know how it's going to work out. In fact, be honest with you, in the portal, I've done a study on this. The
Hmm.
kids that don't sign when they're here, you don't get very many of those. It's just the way it works. And
Yeah.
they start taking other visits. Everywhere they go, somebody offers a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. And they just, Arkansas just doesn't get very many of those kids. I've looked at it, and Miguel Mitchell was one of the few that I remember in recent years that visited here, then left, then signed with Arkansas. He had
Mhm.
other visits, but he did end up signing. But he's one of the few that I can name that did that. Many kids have committed to me while they're here, but they're
Mm.
going to take other visits. And guess what? They didn't end up here. They're not here. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, getting them when they're here is in the portal. High school is not so much that way, but in the portal, get them while they're here. If you don't get them, then you may not get them. There's a good chance you won't get them, and that's why getting Neal was so big yesterday.
Yeah, that was a prize that Arkansas. I mean, that was a big time get, and you make a good point about that. It is clear that the defensive coaches are targeting a certain type of
Yeah,
player and a certain type
yeah,
of body type in the secondary. Because when you go down the list, you kind of spark something, and I just pulled it up, and I was like, hey, man, just look at that DB room, see what type of size they got. And you're right. You go down, it's like Kenai Walker, 6'2", Jaheim Singletary,
yeah,
6'2", Quintavious Scandrett, 6'3". Neal
yeah,
comes in at 6'2", right? Caleb Wooden, 6'1", right? So you just
yeah,
bring in a lot of different size, and that was an
yeah,
area where in a position group where Arkansas knew it needed depth, and
yeah,
you knew the Hogs would attack that position, and they did with another player as well. We'll get to a little bit later, but to get a player of that caliber was a big time win. Another player that was a big time win was a guy in the trenches in Philip Lee, Troy defensive end, 10 starts in 12 games. 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, a forced
yeah,
fumble as well at Troy, and a guy that really was a star for that Troy team last year. Arkansas gets him and bolsters defensive line depth as well.
yeah.
This was another guy that a big time portal win on a big time portal day for the Hogs yesterday.
Yeah. Arkansas felt like he was one of the best, maybe the best pass rusher it's in the portal, and
Mm,
that was the difference with him. There's other kids that may be a little bit bigger, but he can also now. One thing about Phillip is he can flip out, he can switch out the outside linebacker to
yeah.
Jacob. He could play that outside linebacker spot, and he's got the ability, speed, agility. But biggest thing with him is he knows how to get to the quarterback. He had 31 tackles, as you
Hmm.
said, 5 sacks, and I just know I talked to some people that rank uh, do portal stuff, ranking, and they felt like maybe he was one of the best, if not the best, pass rusher in the portal, and that was what Arkansas really, if they took an edge, they wanted him to be somebody that could known pass rusher. They weren't just looking for an edge. They signed 2 in December.
Yeah.
One from Michigan State and one from Florida, but they were looking for someone that was a known pass rusher, somebody they knew could get to the quarterback, and that's where the league comes into play. And getting him was just a nice addition. Originally, he told me yesterday he's going to sign and announce Thursday, but somewhere after he left, he ended up signing and announcing Thursday or announcing last night. So he ended up announcing yesterday he was going. He had told me he was going to sign, but wasn't going to announce it until Thursday. Something happened there, a good deal, because I really won't wait around till Thursday. But
Hmm.
got the story out, and but that was another nice pickup with him. And that was the one deep edge that they targeted. And I don't know if they would have signed an edge had they not gotten him, because they weren't just going to sign an edge to be signing someone there. They wanted a pass rusher, and he is, like I said, if he's not the best in the portal, he's one of the best. And that's the key with Deke right there, was getting a pass rusher.
Yeah, you mentioned the article that you threw up, a great read. People go give it a read after you finish watching this. But something that stood out to me when going through that, Otis, was shocker. He mentioned the defensive staff, and shocker, he
Yeah,
mentioned Deke Adams again. And then what I loved was he said they told me they need a dog, and I'm a dog. I can't wait to get to work
yeah,
with him. And I like that quote a
yeah.
lot because
Can
that's a
I ask you
guy
what?
you want on your defensive line, right? I like that out of him.
Ask you what a dog in the SEC is, and he went on and explained that too, man. Yeah, he is a dog, and that's what you know. That's what Deke wanted. What you call a dog is just get out there on that edge and let him go against that offensive tackle and see who wins that battle, and he's going to win his share of it. And that's why Arkansas really had a priority on Philip Lee. And
Mhm.
he could have gone to other schools, but Deke sold him. And once again, they just did a solid job. That whole staff, it wasn't just Deke or T. Will, but all of them, solid job recruiting these guys. I did first identify them. You got to identify. There's a million
Yeah.
kids in Portland, man. You got to identify somebody that can fit your system, that you want, that can play, and has the ability to do what you want. Not just, like I said, Arkansas not just out here hunting an edge. They're hunting an edge who could rush the passer, a pass rusher, and so that was what they put a priority on, and Philip was the top of the list there. And so, yeah, they put a priority on that, and he was the top priority item at the pass rushing. And we'll see how it translates to SEC. But I know Troy kids have gone on and played in the NFL, and it
Yeah.
translated pretty well. So I have no doubt he can do it at Arkansas and in the SEC. Troy has sent kids to the NFL that have done it. So Yeah, I don't worry about that small school. Andrew Armstrong was Texas
Yeah.
A&M Commerce.
So
You
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 just
you took the words right out of my mouth. So I was gonna
yeah,
say, and I get it why fans often they react with these with
yeah,
it's coming from Troy or well
yeah,
Neil's coming from Fresno State or the guy that we're about to talk about Southern Utah right or whatever it might be.
yeah,
It's just that at a certain point we got to get past this. In
yeah,
terms of just realizing that there's talent everywhere. First and foremost,
yeah.
right in the spring portal window, you can't go get a kid from another SEC school, so that's out of the
Right.
window, right? But even if you go back to, you took the words out of my mouth because while I was sitting there, I was like, man, I'm just going to pull up Andrew Armstrong's profile, right? So we all know, right?
Mhm.
Texas A&M
Yeah,
Commerce. But even
yeah,
there, right? If you go back and you look at 24/7, Otis, he was the 45th ranked wide receiver in that portal
yeah.
class. It wasn't like he was, widely pursued by every
Right.
school in the entire country. And yet, this staff decided he was worth the time. This staff made him a priority. And 2 years later, he led the SEC in receiving. Is every kid that's
Yeah,
going to come in lead the SEC in some respective category? No, but we can't do this with every single kid that signs with
yeah,
Arkansas or anywhere else. It's not just Arkansas
yeah,
fans, it's every
yeah.
fan. But we're getting a kid from
Well,
where? Well, you're getting a kid that the
well,
coaching staff feels like improves whatever position room they're
yeah.
coming into. And there is talent everywhere. And we've seen that time and time again, especially at Arkansas and especially everywhere across the country, too.
Yeah, and you're not going to see as many kids from Troy and some of these other smaller schools
Yeah.
drafted in the NFL because now they're going to be drafted from Arkansas or somewhere like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're transferring out but the old days of kids being in a small school and then getting drafted, you heard a lot. You on draft day, you think, wow, but
Yeah.
that's not going to happen as much now. It's just like the combine. I think there
Hmm.
was only like 4 or 5 kids from smaller schools got invited, whereas in the past there was a long list,
Yeah.
and I heard they talked about that, and it's because now they're at Power Five schools, and but every school, you said every school has players. What the difference is, Troy may not have 22 SEC
Yeah.
caliber players, but they've got some. And they've got some. Every school, A&M Commerce, not going to have 22 SEC
Yeah.
caliber players. They may not have 5, but they had Andrew Armstrong,
Yes,
and
they
that's
did.
where you got to make your living. And that's why I said identifying earlier. I said identifying is as big as anything in recruiting in the portal because you just get names thrown at you. I mean,
Mhm.
they enter the portal every 5 seconds or somebody entering the
Yeah.
portal. So you can't just say, "Well, I'm gonna recruit this kid." You've got to identify them and look at them, and it takes a lot of time to do that because when you're looking at 1,000 kids, you
Mm.
won't say 5. You got to identify them, get on because when you're taking your time identifying them, other schools have already identified them and setting up for business. So
Yeah.
and getting Neil first, believe me, that was huge, man. Getting
Yeah.
Lee here was huge, and all these kids. And so yeah, that's why identifying is as big as anything in the portal because there's a million names. Well, I mean that's exaggerated, but there are thousands of
Close.
names to choose
Close.
from. Yeah, there's thousands of names to choose from, and you've got to identify them and narrow that thing down. You don't have much time to do it, so that's just huge, man. And but yeah, Lee and Neil both really good. The next two we're going to talk about were good players too. And these were, like I said, priority recruits for Sam and that staff.
Hmm. Yeah, well, we move now to Trent Whalen, linebacker. Spent the spring with Kent State after spending the last season with Southern Utah. Again, we kind of got the game plan from Sam.
Yeah,
He told us exactly the position groups they were going to
yeah,
attack.
yeah.
Linebacker was a
That's
group they wanted to bolster as well, and they do so with Whalen here.
Yeah, this kid, we had a funny talk yesterday. He told me, I told him, I said, you heard people say nothing's ever as good as it seems or nothing's ever as bad as it seems. Well, he was at Southern Utah and transferred to Kent State, and they fired their coach, and he's
Yeah.
thinking, crap, I've got to go into portal again. And I told him, I said, at the end of the day, though, you do that, and you end up in Arkansas. You go from Southern Utah to
Yeah.
Arkansas. So it turned out, he said it was a blessing, man. He said, I was so down when they fired Coach Burns at Kent State and was so upset that I was going to have to go into Portland again. He said, no more till I turn around. Arkansas comes in and wants me and offers me. And now I'm in the SEC. So it has a way of working itself out, and it did with
Yeah.
him, man. But it was so funny because he just said, he went from being one of the lowest moments to to the highest moment,
There you
all
go.
in just a matter of a few days or hours. 46 tackles, 21 solos, five and a half tackles for loss. Just a half a sack, forced a fumble, 3 quarterback hurries, broke up a pass at linebacker. He's Coos, 6'3", 235, 6'2" and a half, I think they said, 235 pounds. Good looking linebacker. I mean, good looking kid, and can roam the sidelines. And Arkansas didn't sign a linebacker in the portal in the
Mhm.
early signing period. In fact, they signed 2 high school kids, but J.J. Shelton's really playing more of a hog than he is linebacker. So
Mhm.
you've got Tavian Wallace and this kid about the newer linebackers that they brought in. So that's huge. But yeah, he gives them an older linebacker there. I know that they've had some kids that's making good progress this spring. They bragged on, but this gives them another older linebacker, Dix or so sorry were to get hurt. Kind of an older guy to put in the mix. And he had a good year, and they liked him, and that was the linebacker that they kind of identified they wanted. We'll see how it works out. But yeah, he knows that he may not start, but he knows
Yeah.
he's going to get a lot of reps. He's going to help, and he have a chance to play, and he's going to come in here and compete. And I like his attitude.
Mhm.
But somebody really wants to be here, Jacob. Bottom line is, this kid really wants to be at Arkansas. He was wowed by the facilities, wowed by the coaches. T. Will did a great job recruiting him, as he does every kid on that side of the ball. And we'll see how it works out for him. But I feel like it'll be good. But the bottom line is, it gives them another older linebacker to come in and play in some spot situation, because you never know when somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of young guys like Wyatt Simmons and other guys behind him. You've got really young players at linebacker. Well, once you get past Dix and Sorry, but this kid offers somebody that's a little bit older or quite a bit older. Somebody can come in and give him a little experience. So he's had experience playing in college football. Yeah, that's a nice pickup for him.
Yeah.
Real nice.
Yeah, bolster linebacker depth. That was a goal. The Hogs do that with Waylon. And
Yep.
then wrapping up, Shakur Smalls, a DB out of Maine, comes in,
Yeah.
and it's, again, just adding secondary depth for the Hogs, a guy that Arkansas identified, and just it was a heck of a day yesterday in the portal, just in terms of going down the list time and time again,
Yeah.
and getting some more secondary help here with Smalls.
6', 205. They told him he's going to play safety or hog. He's
Yeah.
going to do one or the other. He's not a corner. He's going to be a safety or a hog. He had 43 tackles, 21 2 tackles for loss. I'm sorry, an interception, 6 pass breakups. Played at Maine. Solid player, just a
Hmm.
solid pickup. They had a lot of defensive backs that were on, and they prioritized Neal and this kid as the top 2. And so now I don't know if they'll take a third. There's one from UTEP. It may visit Tuesday. We'll see if they keep him, or they had him on the back burner waiting to see what these two did. But Smalls was one of their targets, one of their priorities there. And but he is the safety hog guy that got good size. All these players had good size, Jacob. I saw them
Hmm.
all, talked to all of them, stood by them, talked to all 4 of them, and they're all legit. These are legit sizes. These are big kids. They're not small. And Arkansas is doing a good job. They're identifying kids from small colleges, but have the size to play at this level here. And obviously they feel like they've got the talent, or they wouldn't recruit them. And so, but Smalls is active player back there in the main secondary, and we'll see how it works out for him. But I think it's going to be really good, because I think he's just so versatile and can run. He got good size, so
Hmm.
we'll but they liked him. And if people when I talked to Sam the other day, I asked him, or we had him at a press conference. When I asked him, I want a number, Jacob. He
Yeah.
mentioned possibly 5 kids. Well, you've signed 4. Okay, the 5th one, if they take another one, I look for it to be a defensive tackle. Now, they may go over 5, and they may take another defensive back. But I think a defensive tackle would be, if they only take one more kid, I look for it to be a defensive tackle. That's the one spot
Yeah.
that they had these needs that he's identified all along: a pass rusher, a defensive tackle, older linebacker, secondary help. Sam's been consistent with that. Some people
Hmm.
have asked him about receiver and this and that, but he's been consistent with what he wants. But defensive tackle is the one position they have not addressed in the portal so far. In this they got David Oki early, but in this portion, they have not addressed it. And so that's why I think if there's one out there and they can get him and they want him and they've got him identified, I think they'll bring in a defensive tackle. And that'll be if they only sign 5, I look for that to be the 5th one. Now, like I said, that number 5 was not written in stone. It's in
Hmm.
stone. Sam said probably 5, but that can change, and so we'll see. But Yeah, defensive tackle. I think they need another defensive tackle from the portal. I know Saley and Ian and those guys have come on in the spring, but I still think they need another defensive tackle back there to go with Cam Ball and David Oki and those guys.
It'll be interesting to see what the Hogs do. Regardless, a heck of a day in the transfer portal on
Yeah,
Saturday and a heck of a start to the spring window for the Hogs. The spring window
yeah,
open through next Friday. See what Arkansas does. Hopefully, we've got
yeah,
more good news to talk about next week,
yeah.
Otis. But that's going to do it for this week's Arkansas football recruiting report. As always, that is Otis Kirk. I am Jacob Morrison. We'll talk to you next week.